Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Despite a wealth of experience to fall back on, Marvel's Phase 4 is repeating the same tiresome mistakes seen in Phase 1 of the MCU. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's phase is well underway, with Black Widow and Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings already proving successful at the box office despite a somewhat desolate post-pandemic theater landscape. These releases will be bolstered by the presence of Eternals and Tom Holland's third outing in Spider-Man: No Way Home before the end of 2021, marking a highly anticipated festive blockbuster period to be dominated by Marvel releases. The MCU's Phase 4 to date has been all about setting up origin stories for its key players, with Natasha Romanoff's confronting of her past in Black Widow and Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings setting up a canonical framework for its eponymous hero. However, in the context of the wider MCU's continued narrative, these entries feel like hollow placeholders to many audiences, given the climactic events of Avengers: Endgame. The final Avengers installment to date still lives long in the collective MCU memory, with the compelling performances of retired Marvel stalwarts Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. and Captain America, Chris Evans, not so easily forgotten. To date, it seems Marvel's Phase 4 is doomed to repeat in the MCU Phase 1's mistakes given the current state of the MCU narrative. A SLW of generic and underpowered villains, coupled with nonsensical retcons and a stale formula mean Phase 4, in its current state, feels like a rehash of its inaugural film series. Here are 5 of the biggest Phase 1 mistakes that the MCU's Phase 4 is repeating. While Marvel's The Avengers made waves in 2012 due to its grandiose scale and originality, its impact on the superhero genre masks some of its lazier plot elements. This is particularly true of the Chitauri, whose presence ushered in by the trickster god Loki smacks of a copy and paste CGI job, with all the Chitauri looking identical. This lack of diversity in their design, coupled with the casual manner the Avengers dispatch them, makes the entire Avengers Chitauri race feel trivial next to Loki despite them canonically being Thanos' army of choice. Unfortunately, including a generic set of secondary villains is a mistake that looks destined to be repeated by Marvel's Eternals, which will unveil the first look at the evil race known as the Deviants. With the Eternals previews already showing snippets of the omnipotent Celestial known as Arisem the Judge, the Deviants seem destined to take a backseat as an ultimately insignificant threat to the Eternals given the world-altering powers of the Celestials canonically. Despite the presence of the Deviants' leader, Crow, it remains highly likely the majority of the Deviants will be used as faceless fodder for the Eternals to cut their teeth on, giving a soulless feel to the Eternals vs. Deviants MCU conflict as a result. While the Avengers put the MCU on a path to near-complete domination of the superhero genre, the installments that preceded it mostly failed to spark wider audience interest. Early MCU Phase 1 entries such as The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2 feel particularly rigid and uninspired, with both films going to great pains to set the foundations for their respective titular characters. The issue here is that both aforementioned Phase 1 installments leave little room for an actual story, with each scene instead feeling disjointed in an effort to presciently connect to the wider, and at that time burgeoning, MCU. The first films from the MCU's Phase 4 feel eerily similar in their approach, with Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, in particular, acting as little more than a series of Phase 3 callbacks and setups which try to give its espionage-based plot meaning and weight within an already ridiculously superpowered, and overpowered, MCU. Attempting to cleanly integrate characters with a low power ceiling, such as Black Widow and Shang-Chi, into the same phase as demigods Thor and Carol Danvers comes across forced, with their respective ties to the MCU feeling jarring as a result. Of course, it is impossible to perfectly set up every character's backstory without fail, given the shifting nature of film production, even in an entity as successful as the MCU. However, the aforementioned rigidity in which the MCU's phases operate means that when narrative edits are necessary, they are often implemented as breakneck retcons that appear from left field. This first appears in 2012 as The Avengers Against Loki, when the film decides to retcon all of Edward Norton's character's struggles in The Incredible Hulk in favor of Banner suddenly controlling his ability. The Avengers, even more surprisingly, actually retcons itself, with the Hulk in his initial scenes shown to have little control over his transformations. This is a bad habit Marvel's Eternals looks set to repeat, with the film essentially retconning the entire importance of the Infinity Stones, which suddenly seem not to matter again. Thanos' snap has been reversed, and the emergence has begun, meaning that rather than tying the Infinity Stones into Phase 4, they have been discarded in favor of a new Endgame-level threat. Related, Ms. Marvel's MCU power change explained Iron Man 2 is the MCU's prime example of a film containing a poorly executed villain, with its main antagonist Banco barely registering as a credible threat to Tony Stark. The MCU's best big bad characters, as exemplified by Thanos, are villains that far exceed the power level of the current Marvel heroes, making their battles carry high stakes and gravitas in equal measure. Yet it seems as if the MCU's Phase 4 has forgotten this golden rule, with Black Widow's Draco, Ray Winston, the first in a series of uninspired and uninteresting primary villains. Shang-Chi's The Dweller in Darkness is another example here, with the Dweller receiving little backstory or explanation of its potency before Shang-Chi's superhero team soundly defeats the entity. When the Avengers first hit theatres in 2012, it introduced a precise, albeit wildly successful formula that few MCU and Marvel canon installments have been able to shake since. In essence, the framework is this: reintroduce any necessary backstory, assemble a group of heroes, have them face adversity, reform the group to battle a large threat to their existence, all the while adding a smattering of comic relief. While the success of this simple template is not in question, the predictability of the MCU's tried and tested formula has undoubtedly become stale across the 4 phases since its inception. After the climactic events of Endgame, Phase 4 was well set up to try something new with its structure, given the breakup of the Avengers and the new plotlines of the Eternals to be introduced. To date, though, what has been offered by Phase 4 is a structural carbon copy of Phase 1's installments, with both Shang-Chi and Black Widow introducing unnecessary superhero teams into otherwise linear plots. While familiarity is a welcome emotion for any franchise to engender, it should not come at the price of narrative substance, which is a toll the current MCU Phase 4 seems all too willing to pay.